Imagine waking up tomorrow and being told that the person standing beside you can unintentionally take your life, not because they wanted to, but simply because they were breathing. And for most of us, that no longer requires our imagination. We lived it. I'm Dr. Mark Ali, population health researcher and implementation scientist, and I herald our humanity. This is the conversion. And thank you for joining me for yet another report from our discussions. As always, I introduce a topic, our community explores it together, and I return here to share the observations and lessons that emerge from our discussions. Today, we'll talk about what began around the space of pandemics, but it isn't really about disease. We found that out through our discussion. It's about disruption. Earlier this season, we explored the Great Depression and saw how economic collapse rippled through families and businesses and entire communities. Money was the trigger, but the real story wasn't finance. It was how one disruption spread into nearly every part of society, the way we live, our humanity, right? Pandemics work much in the same way. Disease may be the trigger, but the story quickly becomes much larger than health. During COVID-19, we didn't just witness a medical crisis, that was in the forefront. We watched schools change, businesses reinvent themselves, and families reorganize. Communities became isolated. Entire industries were challenged to adapt overnight. A health event became an economic event, a social event, an educational event, and a community event. That's because our lives are interconnected. They're connected in ways we often overlook until something disrupts our daily living. History has shown us this example repeatedly, whether it was the Black Death, the bubonic plague, the influenza pandemic in 1918, or COVID-19. The disease was only the beginning. The real lesson was what happened next. Pressure was a remarkable way of exposing reality. It reveals where we're resilient, it reveals where we're vulnerable, and it reminds us that society is only as strong as the people who make it up, the people who work. That's why I often say that healthy people are our infrastructure. We understand why we invest in roads, we understand why we invest in power grids and communication systems, but those systems depend on healthy people showing up every day to build them, maintain them, and use them. Now, we know that with the emergence of AI and the discussion around the potential of AI to replace certain roles, that some people are perceiving a future where people, humans, are needed less in the production and the development of many things we consume. But without healthy people, even the strongest infrastructure, including a future that's run by AI, begins to fail. Perhaps that's the lesson pandemics have been trying to teach us all along. Health is not separate from society. It supports society. And when it weakens, everything connected to it begins to feel the strain. That is why we study moments like these, not because we expect history to repeat itself in exactly the same way, but because history reveals patterns, patterns in how communities respond, patterns in how people adapt, patterns in how we either come together or drift apart. As we move from culture to CUREture, our responsibility is not simply to remember what happened, and yet that's very important. We have to remember history. But it is to ask what we should build because of what happened. How do we create healthier communities before the next disruption arrive? Many of us talk all the time about how certain geopolitical events cause us to then run over to try to address maybe a vulnerability, maybe in our transport systems and so on, where we all run and try to secure those areas and ignore or abandon other aspects of society. When in fact, the bigger question or the bigger action should be, how do we fortify overall our society, our communities, how we live? So while we may be threatened in the transportation industry, there still may be vulnerabilities in other aspects. And so how do we correct or reduce that vulnerability across the board and not just run at the next challenge we have? So, how do we strengthen relationships before they're tested? How do we preserve our humanity meanwhile, right? While the world around us is continuing to change, how do we preserve our humanity? Those are implementation questions, and that is the conversion from culture to CUREture. So until next time, I ask you to ponder what we talk about, because we are preparing for season 2, where we'll dive more into some of the solutions that are being suggested. And perhaps we'll consider more our role and how we actually fortify ourselves, our communities, our societies, how we protect our humanity. So until next time, be well.